Welcome back to Ghostly Talk. This is Scott L.
This is Amber.
Happy New Year.
Almost.
Well, it's not, yeah.
But maybe by the time you listen to this show, it'll be 2021.
You're probably busy.
And the world will be a better
stuff.
place. It's a new year. We'll start over. It won't be a dumpster fire anymore.
You're
right.
I wish I was more optimistic, but I don't know, man.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, hopefully, this is going to be our last show of 2020.
Yeah.
At least I would say that I'm happy Ghostly Talk was productive this year. We did a lot of cool stuff. Yeah, very productive. Productive. I think we did a lot of really great stuff this year. I had a lot of met a lot of really great people we call friends now. I'll say that. So I'm really happy with how Ghostly Talk went. I'm really happy. That's one of the few things this year, I think, for me that I can say this went really well. We had a lot of great stuff happen here.
Well, and doing this type of medium is actually lends itself to like what's going on in the world right now, because you can sit and talk to people on the phone. You don't have to connect with them in person. Although it's nice to have people like here with us in the basement because it's just a different vibe.
We kind of built the studio out for that.
Yeah, there's
lots of mics, lots of stuff.
4 more people could fit in here.
Lots of expansion. We built that all into the system here, and it's okay, but it'd be nice to use it.
Yeah, someday
with masks
Soon.
on, or I don't know, something like that.
But yeah, it's the end of the year. I do want to mention to people, because I'm obsessed with this right now. I want to pimp something.
Don't say the word pimp. That's off color. I said it earlier too. I know.
Why is it off color?
I said it towards the end of the people. I heard that word. I heard that word now.
Is it because of the sex trafficking?
Yeah, I heard that, and I'm actually right behind that. I can understand that, so I'm trying to stay away from that word too. But I said it at the end of this show. We're about ready to let you guys hear, so I don't know better. But I'm going to call you to the rug.
Maybe that's why I said it, because you said it.
I'm calling you to the rug.
All right. No. I would like to promote something that I enjoyed this weekend.
There you go. That's better. Promote.
All right.
Promote.
All right. And I want everybody that has Disney Plus to go watch Soul.
You've been talking about that all week.
The coolest Pixar flick, and my cousin who is more into like the just frou-frou fun Disney movies.
Yeah.
I was like, go watch it now. You're gonna love it. And she was like, it was so. And so what I think a lot of our listeners will appreciate,
because they don't talk that way, and
I interpret everyone's voice differently. Listeners of the show know I have voices for everything.
Yeah.
So anyway, the show deals with the afterlife, but not really the afterlife. It's like a in-between place where souls are created. And it's an interesting concept of how Pixar chose to animate this using abstraction, and just, it was neat. And then the whole time I'm listening to this background music, which is part jazz, part this ambient, something cool going on. Well, then I find out, I can't remember the person who did the jazz, but he's one of the composers on one of the late night talk shows. Anyway, but the other guy that's involved, Trent Reznor, 9 Inch Nails, like one of my all-time favorite bands.
9 Inch Nails.
So while there's like this medley being played by Jamie Foxx's character, I just was like sucked into it, because now that I know it's Trent Reznor, I'm like, that was like 9 Inch Nails in a Disney movie. It was so cool. So I just recommend it.
Cool. Check it out. No, I like what you explained was kind of interesting. I may have to sit down with that too.
You should. I know you wouldn't want to watch it a second time because you're not like a cartoon guy, but and it's not I think it had a little bit of like a moment when you're like, oh, I get a little teary-eyed. It's not as bad as Up.
Up.
The first 10 minutes will destroy you.
That's just soul crushing. Like I just sat there on the couch looking at you going, why? What did I do to piss you off today to make you have to watch this?
The montage of someone's life.
Brutal.
Just from beginning to end in that first like segment is like
brutal. Brutal.
God. But it is Up's a cute movie.
Stairway Spirits, a new one will be going up after the new year.
Yeah.
Taped a new one last week or over the weekend. And we decided we're going to put that up after the new year. So there'll be a new Stairway Spirits going up. And then 1 or 2 more in January I'm going to shoot for. It's kind of all up in the air right now. We'll see where it goes. But I hope you guys are enjoying that.
Yeah. And as always, if you have stories about stairways that you want to share with Scott, hop on the website.
Stairway Spirits at ghostlytalk.com.
Yeah. And or hit us up on however you want to communicate with us.
Smoke signal.
Social media, gift baskets.
I'll give you my address. You can just come on the porch. We'll make coffee
cheeses.
and we'll talk it over in the porch. Or I'll set up the propane heater in the garage and we can stay warm in the garage and talk about it socially distanced across from a table.
Okay.
Or we can meet in the parking lot. We can meet in a mall parking lot with our hats on and our coats.
That's scary. Don't do that.
And maybe you can sell me a TV set or something too, but you can give me your story. Anything, however you want to do it, reach out to us. But yeah, the easiest I would think is stairwayspirits@ghostlytalk.com.
Yeah.
Thank you. What happened tonight?
Thank you. Is that the end of your service announcement?
Thank you.
Thank you. We had a cool dude on. Is that my voice?
That was you.
That's your interpretation of my voice.
Yeah, you sound like a surfer stoner dude.
Okay.
That
sounds like Ozzy. That sounds like your Ozzy voice.
Sharon.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay.
Watch rock and roll show.
You need to stop. I'm going to tell people about our guest.
Who was our guest?
Ezekiel Kincaid.
Oh.
Yeah.
And who is he?
Well, I found him on Twitter.
Oh, did you?
He found us, actually. Well, our buddy Bud, who's been on the show previously, he sent Ezekiel our way because he writes for Horrorbound, which is, I guess I would describe that as like an online horror anthology.
Yeah.
And so anyway, he had like an interesting, like supernatural experience that he wanted to get our opinion on. And as I was talking to him on Twitter, I'm like, okay, we got to have you on the show. Like, not only are you a minister, or a pastor. Is there a difference between minister and pastor? Is that a denominational title difference?
Wikipedia, you got your phone in front of you.
Right, I do, but I don't want to use it. So anyway, he was a pastor for 20 years, and then he now writes horror fiction. So I'm like, this is an interesting combination. We got to talk to him. But his bio, Ezekiel Kincaid brings a unique and original touch to the horror genre. Why? Like I just said. Well, there are a lot of reasons. First, he was a pastor for 20 years. So he knows a thing or three about the demonic, death, and dealing with people in crappy situations. Second, the only other language he is fluent in is sarcasm. This means he has a flair for horror comedy. Third, he also has a serious intellectual side, seeing that he has 3 theological degrees. He can write deep and thought-provoking horror that will make you question everything and poo your pants. He actually writes that, poo your pants. At the same time, finally, Zeke was a child of the 80s and can do throwback better than you can. He is from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, but currently lives in Blowing Rock, North Carolina. So enjoy our show with the author Ezekiel Kincaid.
Coming out of a bunker in Michigan, ghostly talk, he's in your ears again. Buckle up, give your head a spin again. Turn it on and come right in. Born in 2002, the one and only GT crew, coming back old school, run right over you. Ghostly talk, ghostly talk, ghostly talk, ghostly talk.
So I was lurking on the Twitter, which I'm not.
The Twitter. You sound like Larry King.
The Twitter.
I was on the YouTube the other day.
I'm on like Ghostly Talk's on all of the social media platforms, but I know we don't post a lot. Me as a human being, I don't post a lot, but I lurk. And so I always lurk on Twitter, and then one day I get a message from Bud Fugate, who's been on the show.
Yeah.
And he says, hey, you got to meet this guy that writes for my website, Horrorbound. I think he's got a story to tell you. I think you guys are really going to, connect, and, maybe he wants to be on the podcast. Right, so I'm like, okay, yeah, cool. So he sends me the information for Ezekiel Kincaid, and we start talking, and I'm like, this is spooky. Okay, we got to get him on the show and talk more about his experiences. So welcome to the show, Ezekiel. We're glad to have you, and I want to jump right in to our Twitter conversation and this spooky experience you had with this doll, this dream, and this book you are writing and working on right now.
Yeah, thank y'all for having me. And so I'll just kind of jump right into it. So I have a novel that I am trying to get published right now, which would be my second full-length novel, and it's called Theodosia. and it's kind of a blending of The Exorcist and Carrie and In the Mouth of Madness.
Ooh.
And as I started writing this novel, it was kind of the idea of you have this young child and this young girl named Theodosia. It takes place in the early 1800s in North Carolina, and it's hard to tell if she is born evil or if she's insane. And so I'm starting to write this book. She has this demon friend named Hophni that kind of guides her along into her descent into darkness. And so I had this book all outlined, and I was about halfway through it, and I had a dream one night, and this little redheaded girl comes to me, and she says, "My name is Theodosia, and this is not how my story happened." And the dream was very visceral and real, and she began to walk me through her farmhouse and show me everything that happened. And so I woke up from that dream just kind of a little on edge and uneasy about everything, but I started to write. And there were times when I would write this book that I would look up and this little redhead girl would be standing there. And the story, I kind of drew the inspiration. My mom had this real haunted picture in her house of this little redhead girl, and it's a real haunted picture from Austin.
Okay.
Austin, Texas. And so that's what kind of inspired it. I'm just kind of give you a little background.
Yeah. What was haunted about the photo? What happened around it?
The little girl supposedly fell down the stairs in this house and died. So you can actually look up haunted photos, Austin, Texas, about a little girl, and you can see the picture.
Okay, cool.
And so you can Google that, and that's the picture that inspired Theodosia. That was hanging in my parents' home since I was young, and so that picture always stuck with me. And it wasn't until I started writing this book that I found out that it was a real haunted painting. So that just kind of added to everything. Okay. So the little girl would appear, and sometimes she would be her sweet little redheaded self, and then other times she would have this kind of Reagan look from The Exorcist, and she would tell me how the story would go along. This happened for a while, and then once I finished the manuscript, I was done. I didn't want anything else to do with her. But then as I started to try to get the book out there, I was like, well, you know what? I need to kind of do some promo stuff with this. And so I bought a doll that I found this past October at a Spirit Halloween store. I walked in and I saw the doll, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's Theodosia. So I bought the doll and I brought her home. And before I tell you what happened, I'm going to backtrack a little bit. So when all of this stuff was happening with writing the book, there was another dream that I had, and it was her again. And she said, my name's not really Theodosia, it's Sarah Jane Kinsey. And in the book, it's not really a spoiler here that I'm giving away, because it's going to be no surprise when people start reading it that the girl, she dies in the book at 13 years of age, and she dies in the year 1824. And in the book, her mother's name is Sarah, and her father's name is Charles. So I look up this Sarah Jane Kinsey, and the only thing that I can find is a little girl who, instead of in the book, she dies in 1824. But what I find about Sarah Jane Kinsey, she's born in 1824, dies at 1837, 13 years of age. And her name is Sarah, and she has a brother named Charles. Yeah,
that's when on Twitter, that when I was reading that, I was like, oh my God. Like, how cool is that to be you sitting there typing that out, just being like, I'll just do a Google search on this. And then that shows up. Like,
that unnerved me. Yeah.
Weird
so
coincidence.
That's when I started to realize that, there's probably a little bit more going on here than meets the eye.
Yeah.
So just real quick, back to the doll. So I was doing a promo video after I bought the doll. I bring her home, name her Theodosia, showing her to my kids. We're all having fun with the doll. So I put the doll on my horror shelf on a stand that I have with all my horror movies and books and stuff. And I was doing a promo video for a site, and I did like 6 or 7 takes. And each time I mentioned her at the very beginning, but the video was too long. And so the last take that I took, I didn't mention her at the beginning at all. And it's at the beginning there when I start talking about one of my other previously released books that, Scott and I showed you this video, and we were kind of debating back and forth a little bit if it was really real or not, but you could see the light orbs coming from the doll. Yeah. And I saw that and I was like, oh my gosh, this is weird. Well, about 4 days later, I'm talking to a client of mine, and she's like, she's read Theodosia. She was one of my beta readers and stuff. And she was showing me these videos of light orbs because I had showed her the video with the doll, and she was like, oh, let me show you this. Let me show you this video. Look at this huge light orb. And it was security camera footage of a front door, and you can see this massive light orb fly out about the size of a fist. And I was like, wow, that's pretty crazy. Well, we start talking, and come to find out she's like best friends with the landlady who is over the apartment that I live in. And she looks at me and she says, Zeke, this light orb was filmed right outside your front door. Yeah. And I was like, are you kidding me? I was like, what's the date on that? She said October 10th. So that evening I went home and I pulled up my receipt from when I bought the doll, and it was October 10th when I bought the doll and brought her into the home.
Whoa. And this was from a Spirit Halloween, you said?
Yeah, it was a Spirit Halloween doll. I walked in, and they have those little spirit dolls. Yeah. And I was like, that's Theodosia. Like, it looks very similar to her. So I'm going to get this doll and use her as a prop to promote the book. Hopefully, whenever it does get accepted for publication and come out. So that's kind of the story behind everything that's gone on with this doll. I did kind of do an exorcism over the doll, and I haven't had any weird things happen, although there was one time I had a friend over, and they walked by the shelf, and the doll started like vibrating, and they got freaked out. They were like, get this doll, put it back in the freaking closet.
Is that something it does? Does it vibrate, or is?
I've never seen it vibrate before. No,
I didn't know if it had batteries or did something weird.
No, it doesn't. It's just a hollow plastic doll, and they got really freaked out, and they're like, "Get this doll and put it back in the freaking closet. I don't want this thing anywhere near me."
Well, what I find interesting, that's why I pointed it out, is that this was bought at a Spirit Halloween, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes,
it wasn't bought at some back alley antique shop with some old man,
incense burning.
With some old man crouched, with a back problem.
Old crouched. Cat on the checkout counter.
Yeah, I didn't buy it on the back street like a Chucky doll.
Yeah, that's what I find really interesting about this, and that takes my mind down a lot of wild roads. Like, because obviously haunted dolls, you hear a lot about stuff. Let's say haunted objects. Yeah, right.
Yeah,
and a lot of times they have a lot of history behind them.
Yeah.
They're older, let's say. They're more antique type things. All the stuff, honestly, I've come in contact with, I've seen, a lot of it is older in nature. This is different. This is something you bought. Like you said already, it's just a hollow plastic doll, right?
Yeah.
So what that makes me think about is that, it don't have to, like anything. We've said this about houses too. Yeah. It don't have to be some old Victorian house, with a witch flying over it and stuff like that to be haunted. It could be anything, honestly.
Whatever energy might be following Ezekiel around right now and around this story that he's writing and creating, like maybe it's just like, oh, I'm just going to go hang out in this doll. Just gonna go chill here.
I'm also gonna have Bert or Ernie's voice too.
Well, that's just my haunted object voice.
Hi, I'm a haunted doll.
My haunted doll voice. I don't know.
So
if I hear her talk, I'm done.
But I do think that's really interesting that, and I think, Amber, you're going down the right path on that. Is that, maybe we're talking about a piece of art here, right? And art is an emotional thing especially for the people that create it. There's a lot of energy expelled on that, with your time, with your emotion, as I said. So why couldn't stuff like that be imprinted on things, especially with something that you're directing your energy directly at? And I don't care where it comes from. That seems very plausible to me.
Do we want to play the EVP right now?
It's up, Ezekiel. Would you like to do that?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, set us up for this and tell us what happened during
Don't
this.
set us up too much. Yeah, we don't want to set up
let's
too
just
much.
See what okay.
Okay, so
give us a light setup.
a light setup is I did an EVP with the doll to see if I could record anything, and when I ask if it's Theodosia in the doll, something happens. So we'll just let the listeners see if they pick up on that.
All
right. This is a 2-minute file. We're just going to let the whole thing play out. Okay. Here we go.
Okay.
I am speaking in the name of Jesus to whatever entity is in this doll. I command you to come forth in the name of Jesus and reveal yourself. Why are you here? Why are you in this doll? Theodosia, is this you? Is there an entity, human or non-human, attached to this doll? If you are here, make your presence known. What are you trying to tell me? This is your last chance because I am casting you out. Whatever spirit is attached to this doll, I command you in the name of Jesus to leave. I cast you out. You are not welcome here. You leave this doll in the name of Jesus, and I bind you from coming back to her. Theodosia, if this is you, you need to let me know, or you will be gone for good. In the name of Jesus, tell me who you are.
I like, even if it's, it's not obviously like something comes out like, I am Theodosia. But listening to him do like sort of the more biblical EVP session, I guess. It's sort of, you get this anticipation if you're listening to it for the first time, like you almost are waiting for something really horrible to happen. And then, but it's subtle, the things you hear.
Let's look at a couple of these things that I jotted down. I'm gonna go, you know what? I'm gonna pause this real quick because I have to get it where come on, dude, get there. All right. So the first spot that I wrote down was at the 35-second mark. I've queued at 33, so I'm going to play it from there.
Okay.
Here we go.
Is there an entity?
I want to roll it back a little further, actually, because that was right on the money, actually. I nailed it, which is not what I wanted to do. So let's play. I'm going to roll it back to 27 seconds. Here we go.
Theodosia, is this you? Is there an entity, human or non-human, attached to this doll?
Do we want to talk about that for a second? What I heard, is that cool? Can we do that?
Yeah, go for it.
So, I want to start off by saying this. Sometimes, and you said you were using your phone for this. It was an Android phone.
Yes.
Good quality. Those things always pick up.
Yeah.
They're very clear and sharp. Sometimes though, I want to point this out, and I'm not I'm not dumping on this at all. Sometimes you can get little artifacts in the audio, right? However, what I find interesting about this was that you hear that rapping, let's say, not rapping like Run DMC rapping, like rapping like you hear like somebody rapping like on a door or some kind of sound you hear, right? Right around the 35-second mark in this file. And you hear it, I think, like 5 times. And the thing is it comes right after.
Very quick.
It's very quick, but it comes right after your question that you asked, right?
Yeah.
So it's a callback, it's an answer back to that. And I think your email that you had for this, this was some type of Morse code, or you guys did pull some Morse code. On this?
Yeah. So when I slowed it down, I heard 6 taps. I heard 1, 2, 3, 4, then 5, 6, really quick. And I looked that up in Morse code, and it means hi.
Oh my God!
And so, yeah, that made my skin crawl.
That's
pretty
weird.
Yeah,
that's
really
weird.
trippy. So going forward to, it would be at the 55-second mark. I'm going to roll it back to like 47, I think, just to get some posterity on it. So let's do this. Let me roll it up real quick here.
I am speaking.
No. Here we are.
If you were here, make your presence known. What are you trying to tell me? This is your last chance because I am casting you out.
I want to pause it for a second now. I heard some more of that rapping.
Yeah.
As you were asking that, right around the 55-second mark.
Or a chair squeak. I don't know if the squeak was like a chair
I
or...
didn't hear the chair squeak. I just heard the rapping.
Oh, okay.
What do you think it is? Just curious what your thoughts are.
I think that it is the energy from the ghost of this little girl that she has kind of attached herself to me, to the doll, to tell her story. And that's what this book really comes down to is it is at its heart the essence of dealing with the question of God and evil. Why does a good God allow so much evil and suffering? And this family in the book is a very God-fearing family. The dad is a professor of ancient religion at UNC. And so he is seeing this descent of his daughter and this stuff going on with his family. His family is just unraveling. And there's a very pivotal scene in the book to where he is broken over what is happening with his daughter, with both of his daughters, with his wife. And he is actually talking to his local pastor, who plays more of a pivotal character later on in the book. And they're having this very real and honest discussion about evil and suffering. And so at the heart of it, this is really what this book wrestles with. It wrestles with that question. Because a lot of my fans know I was a pastor for a long time. And so there are times that I like to kind of take the big questions of life and wrap them up in a horror story and give the reader something to think about while at the same time scaring the crap out of them, which is what this book does. I've had several beta readers. I've had one not be able to finish it, and the others have had nightmares over it. So I'm hoping that it'll get picked up soon. But that's kind of at the heart of what this is. This is a terrifying horror story, very visceral, very surreal, very in your face, but yet at the same time deals with some deep questions of life.
Well, and that's what I want to get into is because your past, you have been a minister. You come from a religious background. You have 3 theological degrees. And then you start writing horror fiction about, what, 3 years ago, 2017, I read?
Yes,
and then it sounded like, from when I was reading on your blog, that you had a bunch of people who might have been part of your congregation or family members or friends that are like, what are you doing? why are you doing
Yeah.
this? And started getting judgy on you. This was when I was reading through your post on why you started writing this. It made perfect sense because when I was introduced to you on Twitter and I went and looked at like your Twitter intro, your bio on Twitter, and I'm like, oh my God, he's been a minister and he writes horror. Like your first thought is to be like, huh? Question mark. And then it makes perfect sense when you break down the central themes in horror, which is good versus evil, light versus dark, and the rest that you write: sin, fear, perseverance, survival, and of course the supernatural, which are all parts of the Bible. So it makes perfect sense as someone who's been a minister that's dealt with all of these things when you're dealing with the human condition in general, to explore this topic through the mechanism of horror fiction. It's
Absolutely. You nailed it, Amber. It was for me as a pastor and all of my experience, there's nothing that captures the reality of life more than the horror genre, based on what I've seen. And I grew up as a horror fan, have been since I was a little kid. And just one day it clicked for me about how to unite the two. How can I combine my faith with my love of horror? And those themes that you just mentioned, those were the things that I saw and brought the two together. And it didn't go over well at all when I started doing this. I have lost a lot of friends, a lot of family over this endeavor, but it's something that I'm passionate about. This is my new type of ministry. You know, people are like, what in the world is a pastor doing writing horror? Like, why is this pastor do like associating with us horror people? And I'm like, yo, I'm one of y'all. Like, I love horror.
yeah.
And it's not like all my stuff is not preachy or have religious overtones or anything like that. A lot of times I like to write horror just because I want to write a good horror story.
Yeah.
But there are things that I write where there is definitely everything is intentional. And that's the thing about Theodosia in this book. Like, every scene, everything that I do in this book from the very beginning to the very end is absolutely intentional and essential to getting her story told and getting it out there. And the story that I think that Theodosia wants people to know is that there are sinister forces. There is darkness. There is evil in this world. And we have to decide how are we going to respond to it, because a lot of times we can't control the circumstances and the hand that we're dealt. But it's how are we going to respond to the evil that comes our way? Are we going to give into it? And like Theodosia, she's just consumed with it, and she totally follows down this path of no return. And the consequences of her life and what she does to her family are absolutely horrendous. Or are we going to hold on to the light and do good and be part of that good overcoming evil in this world?
Right. And I know a lot of people that aren't fans of the horror genre or have never taken the time to read a book from it. They're probably a little misguided on what you can actually do and say and even inspire with a horror book, because Stephen King's a good example. He's like one of the top writers in the world, and look what he writes. I know not all of his books are terrifying or have like really creepy things in them, but the topics he deals with definitely aren't always lighthearted and usually do have that supernatural element in them. Although I have to admit, I still have never in my lifetime read a Stephen King novel, which is really weird.
You're missing out.
I know.
Really?
I don't know why. I haven't. It's really odd, but I need to check that like bucket list. Read Stephen King novel. I was told to just start out at the beginning.
Yeah, early King is the best.
Yeah. So one of these days I'll finish one, but there's a reason why the horror genre is one of the biggest ones out there, and it doesn't have to be like. When you write, because of your background with religion, do you ever hold back a little bit just because of your background?
I did at first, but after that, I haven't since like within the first year, because what I've come to see, and this is what a lot of people have struggled with, is in my Christian community is they have this inability to separate the art from the artist. So just because I present a character a certain way, that he or she does certain things, he or she says certain things, he or she responds certain ways to things, does not mean that I, in my own personal life, agree with that.
Yeah.
And a lot of times people are like, well, how can you write this character? And I'm kind of like, well, it's art. I'm creating a story. I'm creating a character. Just because this character does something, that's not a reflection of my own morality. And that's the thing, like artists and writers, they understand that. But a lot of times other people who don't have that mindset and understand it, they have a lot of trouble grasping that. So they automatically see you in every single character that you write.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily the case.
I think the judgment comes from, excuse me, especially when it comes from a place of faith. I guess the idea, and this is just me from looking from the outside in, is, well, you're devoted to this faith that we're familiar with, and how can you let that creep in your mind? Something like that. You should. I mean, I understand the idea of purity and things like the purity of thought, purity of body, right? Purity of heart, and I think that's where. To play devil's advocate for a half a second, I think that's where I think people come from, where you get that judgment from, I think.
Yeah. And my response, I mean, you're absolutely right, Scott. My response to that is, when we look at certain scriptures and Bible stories that are, talk about sex, talk about all of this violence and stuff, when you read the scripture, I mean, you're in essence, you're putting those thoughts in your mind.
Yeah.
You're reading the story about the judges in the book of Judges where they hack this poor girl up to pieces and mail her body parts out to all the people in the area because of some certain sin that she did.
Yeah.
And so my response is that the Bible is a very gritty and real book and presents the human condition for what it is. And we are able to read these stories and see the violence, see the sex, see the sinfulness, but because there is a bigger redemptive picture at times, a lot of times these things go just right past people, and then they say, oh, it's because it's the Bible.
Yeah.
And that kind of content gets glossed over.
Well, yeah, it gets overshadowed because
Right.
I think people, the message that people want to get from that is the obvious message, right? And all that other little stuff doesn't really matter that much. I think that's a very broad way of, I think, painting that for us. But I mean, I think that's what it really is, or they term the ends justify the means, right? And that's why, yeah, you're right. I think it does get glossed over, some of these more gritty elements of the Bible.
Yeah, and then, you have a horror writer like me come along, and I use violence and stuff in my stories, and then, just all hell breaks loose and the stuff hits the fan, and, it's like, oh my gosh, how can you write this? How can you have this in your story? How can you have this violence? How can you have this cursing? And I just kind of want to be like, let's go back and let's look at this book that we, in our community, we hold so dear because of the message that it holds out of Christ and redemption in spite of the human condition, because the Bible is full of the human condition and what people are capable of. Yeah. But that sets the backdrop to shine off the grace and redemption and love of God. And I think that's what a lot of people in my community miss.
Well, and it's refreshing to hear this too, honestly, Ezekiel, because I think the Bible is just revered, like you said, as this tome that this is the Word. This is the Word. That's it. And hearing the human condition being, injected into the Bible itself is something I talk about that. I talk about Sodom and Gomorrah, right? I talk about a lot, and some of the uglier things. And I think a lot of some people do point out, that's where you get the angry debating people. Well, the damn Bible's nothing but violence. Blah, blah, blah. Well, yeah, it is. And there's a lot of ways I think to look at that. I also think that someone who has a faith, who's devout, right? They can explore disturbing elements in their mind. And that's what a lot of this stuff, I think, that, horror itself, I think the reason that people like horror so much is because it is a disturbing thing. It's something that you're not normally exposed to. It's as a lot of people I've talked to, it's a roller coaster ride. It's the same thing. It gives you some type of weird thrill. And yeah, it is morbid. Yeah, it can be scary, but I think it can be, above all, it's disturbing. And I know, honestly, I hate to say this. Well, it's not a bad thing, I don't think. I like being disturbed every once in a while. I like having a story presented to me. I mean, there's lines I've drawn, and Amber knows the lines that I've seen where I walk out of the damn room, right? But but I like a disturbing premise, more of a disturbing story. Right? Anybody can take a camera and hack up people and do whatever, and we've seen all that stuff, right? It's not easy to do, but it's not hard to do these days, especially. But for someone to really take a headspace of a story and explore that headspace and come up with some very interesting ideas that drive a plot line, disturbing or not, that's what I personally find very interesting. I think that's what a lot of people find interesting about horror, too. And I also think that it's okay to expose your mind to those things. If anything, for detractors of that sort, and I mean, they have their opinion, and that's super cool. Is your faith that weak? Is your faith that weak that you can't handle a set of boobies? You can't look at a set of boobies and not freak out or something like that, right? I mean, really.
Right.
I think when you just said that, is your faith that weak? Because there was something else that I had to highlight. I'm
not pooping on anybody here. I mean, it's just an idea. Right?
I hear you. I agree.
But there was something else I read in Ezekiel's blog that made me cackle out loud because being a library worker, like I had to chuckle at this.
Yeah.
But and these people that are so fragile sometimes that they can only read certain books. So I highlighted this quote. I have to pull this from your blog, Ezekiel. But he says, people are messy and so is life. If you want cookie cutter fiction with two-dimensional characters who never do anything wrong, or if you want an unrealistic portrayal of life, there is an entire genre for that. It's called Christian fiction. I cackled. No, I cackled. I'm serious. Funny. Because there was always a certain type of person, and I'm sorry if any listener out there, which I highly doubt, listens to Ghostly Talk and avidly reads Christian fiction every night. But there were people that you would see check out these books, and you were just, I couldn't help but think, like, what do you do wrong at night that you're not telling anybody?
Oh, there's some nasty.
What do you
there's
do?
Something nasty going on there.
Especially the people that read the Christian fiction, but it was Amish fiction.
Dude, there's Amish fiction?
Oh, yeah.
What about? I never knew about all these cool subgenres.
Amish fiction. And usually written by, like, a Christian woman. It's not really like the Amish are out there penning novels.
I want to read an Amish fiction.
And then we would have, like, little things. When it comes to, like, Ezekiel getting judged for just putting swear words in, which humans have been doing since the beginning of time. And there was
word's a curse. Things like that.
There was, like, one example. I remember what book it was. But one guy brought a book back to the library, and he was so upset about the swear words in it that he had taken a pencil, at least it was pencil, and he crossed out every single swear word in the book as if that was going to, like, okay, I just fixed the problem. Now people are safe to read this book.
He gets a salute. He's doing his part.
So anyway, I chuckle. I just kind of chuckle at, like, that whole, like, Christian fiction land, and then people that get so uptight and, like you said, like, is your faith that...
Is it that brittle?
That brittle.
Is it that brittle? Yeah. And it's not. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that from a place of utter respect when it comes to people's beliefs too. All right. Neither of us are here to beat up on anybody's belief system. But that's my question. I have is it that brittle that you can't have something put? I mean, because things happen. I mean, here's a good example I think of, because I hear people nowadays, and I may have even done it myself once or twice, or 3 times or 4 times. We'll get there. Where you hear people out in public cussing a lot more. Like you hear, I mean, I'll be walking through a store and I'll hear people like openly just letting off F-bombs and stuff like that, right? And then right 5 foot away, I'll see like a couple of, like a 5 or 6 year old who are very impressionable at that time in their lives. And I mean, I know growing up, when I was growing up, that just didn't happen.
Well, the F word was the king of kings. Like that.
Well, yeah, you couldn't,
If you heard that word, you were like,
yeah,
I have to burn my ears now.
Well, yeah, Ralphie told us that in a Christmas story, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm seeing a lot. The world is changing to a certain degree, I think, and people are getting a little more loosey-goosey on things like that.
Loosey-goosey?
Loosey-goosey.
Did you just turn 90?
Yeah, I just turned 90.
Okay.
People are getting more loose about things like that. So my point is, if you have faith, you have this faith that you have, I guess. There's a lot you're going to be exposed to, I think. That's out of your control. I'm sorry. It's out of your control, especially if you're a citizen of the internet. Oh, my God. There's just things that are going to pop up, on Facebook, for example, that you have no control of. And how do you deal with it? Well, then there's a lot of ways you can. You can control it to a certain degree, I guess. Like, mute that, block this, unfollow, whatever. But still, something's going to sneak in there. I don't care. Something's going to sneak in there. Or you're going to hear a curse word out in public. Or you're going to see somebody spray paints a phallic figure on a wall when you're driving down the street. I've seen that. Which, I'm sorry, that makes me chuckle a little bit. But
awesome.
I'm a weirdo. You're going to see stuff. That's the point. So, is it that brittle that you can't handle that? That it's that phallic thing on the wall that's spray painted is going to just crush your world, and you're not going to know what to do after that.
Yeah.
No. That's a question. That's all it really is. Is just is it that weak? So yeah.
I mean, I totally agree. And this is a lot of kind of my issue with a lot of the conservative circles that I used to run in with conservative Christianity, is there was kind of like this mindset of us versus them mentality, and we're behind this wall and you're all out there.
Yeah.
And that's, at my heart, that's never been my heart. Like, I've always wanted to go out among the people and be part of the people. And, I'm not out to convert everybody, but I'm out to be like, hey, I'm here to be salt and light. This is who I am. This is my faith. If we can strike up a conversation and talk about it, that's cool. I respect what you believe. You respect what I believe. But, if you want to talk about it and have a listening ear, then, here it is.
Yeah.
And I've always had the mindset, a scene that stuck with me always, is from Jurassic Park, when there's that big, huge pile of dinosaur crap and they're having to dig through it to find out what's wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
In my mind, that's what a Christian minister is supposed to be. He's supposed to be out in the crap of the world, digging through it and being with people with their issues as they're trying to struggle through the manure of life. And so for me, writing horror was kind of my way to do that. And my book that I have out now, Johnny Walker Ranger Demon Slayer, is it's a Bruce Campbell tribute. It's a horror comedy.
My man.
Based off of the spirit of Evil Dead. Johnny Walker Ranger leads a demon-killing team called the Bruce Campbells. And he is a train wreck. He's an alcoholic. He is a foul-mouthed redneck. But he has this call from God to kill demons. And so there's not a lot of demons, so he has to come up with a way to get people possessed to fulfill his calling. And the thing about the book is, it's a horror comedy. It's nonstop laughs, over-the-top gore. I mean, it's like Ash versus Evil Dead.
Yeah.
But the thing about it, at its very core, the message behind it, amidst, if you were to scrape back all of the humor, scrape back all of the foul language in the book, and scrape back all the violence, the message of the book is that, yes, we are all absolute train wrecks, but God still wants to use us, and he still has a purpose for us on this planet. And so that's kind of the heart of what this book is. And so all that to say is my style is different. I know not a lot of pastors could bring themselves to do what I do, to write what I write, to pen the things that I pen, but that's them. That's not me. This is what God has called me to do, and he's given me that certain sort of grittiness to be able to pull it off. In my own personal life, I'm very witty, very sarcastic, I don't mind like saying things like that quote that you read, Amber, like
Yeah.
that's me. I would say
Yeah.
that to somebody's face. And that's kind of what's got me in trouble in a lot of churches in the past. But that's a whole nother topic.
I think spiritualism is changing too. I mean, as far as faith, I mean, I have family members that belong to a church, and I've been there. I've been there for baptisms of my niece and nephew and stuff like that. And I'm seeing the world change in that aspect too. It seems like a little bit. I'm seeing things be a bit more laid back. We're not coming in our Sunday bests anymore. We're coming in shorts and t-shirts. That's what these people. I looked around, I'm like, because I'm in a sports coat. I'm like, okay, I'm going to church. You dress up when you go to church. I'm just old like that. And there's people walking in there with Tigers, Tigers jerseys on and shorts, and I'm like, wearing baseball caps. What's going on here?
You have to be. I think religions had to become more approachable and adaptable with
the
newer generation.
And it should be approachable. I think
it's not this place where you got to go and act a certain way and get shushed and half the mass is in Latin or something. It's just like no, you're not going to reach out to people that way.
I think the beauty of that though is just that people do recognize that and recognize that. Yeah, it is a different time now, and the generation that's coming up that do have faith like this, they just behave differently, and they may be more rough around the edges, right? Because I think a lot of people. I mean, as you're saying this, Ezekiel, I'm thinking of some great characters that I've come across over the years of watching movies. I mean, this little film called The Blues Brothers. I think a few people saw it, maybe, right?
Just a few.
Those are two. I mean, as far as characters that were written by somebody who I know for a fact is in the same boat you're in. They have faith like this, right? But they wrote these two criminal, cussing, smoking, drinking, foul-mouthed men who fell into a mission from God.
Mission from God.
A mission from God, right?
From God.
And they were on a mission from God. These are mysterious men. You never see their eyes.
That's actually a chapter in my book, Johnny Walker Ranger Demon Slayer.
What is that?
We're on a mission from God.
Oh, you're on a mission from God? Yeah.
God, G-A-D.
Those were dirty. Those were rough characters, though, right?
Yeah, they were absolutely.
And they were men of faith. Well, I mean, they became men of faith. Right, over time, I think. I mean, that's really digging into the guts of the story. So I don't think that, going back to the very point, I know we've really beat the hell out of this point, but going back to, because I find it fascinating. I do find it fascinating that I think people who are spiritual, who have this faith you're talking about, they do come in all different shapes and sizes and colors and all types of things, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's being finally recognized now, and I think that's beautiful. And I also think that, I mean, here's an example of this that I'm thinking of. There's a club that we used to before COVID destroyed the world, but there was a rock club we go and see bands play at. Really heavy bands would play, right? And not 2 doors down from that club is a church. It's on a main street in a downtown area. And one night I came there to see some bands play and scream their heads off, and I'm walking in, and these couple of guys were standing there with a little table set up and a big thermos of coffee, and they're like, "Hey, you want a cup of coffee?" And it just sounded good. It was cold outside. I'm like, "Yeah, man, that sounds kind of cool." And of course, they're gonna catch you in a corner, which I don't feel that way. So yeah, they did say, "Hey, man, so were you going to see the bands play?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm going to watch these bands play." And they're like, "Well, yeah, we're from the church down the street." And I know right there, that's when people are going to go, "Ah!" and they go running away, right?
Yeah.
So, but I didn't do that. I didn't want to do that. And we ended up having a great conversation. We had a really great conversation, honestly. And and we talked about love. What is love? We talked about all these things. Of course, my friends keep coming out there nudging me, going, "Dude, you need us to get you out of here." And I'm like, "No, I'm good. I'm having a nice conversation with these guys. These guys are cool. I like them, right?" And I'm seeing more of that too. Maybe I'm looking for it more, but I like, because I have my beliefs too. But I know most people that run in my circle, at least, they're shut off. They don't want to hear about it. They don't want to hear anything about anything. They don't want to hear from anybody who wants to talk about that. Go away. Leave me alone. Where I'm like, let's talk about this for a few minutes. Let's talk about these cool things. I think that's fantastic stuff. I think the world needs more stuff like that.
Yeah.
Ezekiel, are you still an active pastor?
I am not since I started writing horror.
Okay.
I've kind of, it's just
Okay.
shut the door on that part. So horror writing is my type of ministry. And I've been able to, obviously talk a lot about my faith since I've started doing this and share with people. And, for me, that's just kind of how it's been. This is the doors that have opened up for me. And, the fact that I, as a Christian and as a former pastor, I guess, have the guts to write what I write in the way that I do, it's made people kind of take notice. And with my sarcasm and sense of humor, it's made me very approachable. And so people aren't as standoffish with me about stuff. And I've had some great conversations with folks just about spirituality, about life in general. People coming to me and saying, hey, this is going on. I know you're a pastor that writes horror. I'm a horror fan, and all this stuff. So it's been really good for me in that aspect. Kind of
There's
one
not
of
a
the surprising things.
There's not a subgenre already called Christian horror, is there?
There is.
Is there?
There is. And a lot of times it is, it's kind of, so if you were to take my horror writing and cut out the profanity and the violence, that would kind of be it.
Okay. So they might just be like, the monster came and hit us. And then they go to the next chapter.
No, the monster came.
Ouch. I said, dang it. Stop.
Yeah. Like,
oh no, I'm going to die.
So I remember a funny story. I remember when all this started coming out about my writing, and having debates with people on Facebook, and we were talking about creating believable characters. I was like, okay, so if I am going to have a character who is a human trafficker and a gang member, and he is holding somebody up, is he going to tell this girl, hey, young lady, phooey, get in my darn van?
No, that is not real.
I'm like, no, that's not. I mean, he's going to be saying some very colorful, graphic stuff. So, anyway, that you just made me think of that.
That's the element of it. That's what the element is. And I mean, if you're writing a story, I think you have to be factual about your characters and how they behave. That's just my personal opinion. I mean, if I saw a story, just like you said, hey, you get in my car, we're going to enslave you into sexual servitude.
I would just, if someone pulled up
I
to me
can't
and
say the word
said
sexual
that,
servitude.
I would just look at him and go, okay. And I would
Sure
just
you
walk away.
Yeah, I mean,
you start looking like for the earpieces. Is this some Practical Jokers?
Yeah, no.
What's going on?
No. Well, I think what you're doing is really awesome.
I think it's a different idea. It's cool.
I'm glad that people that have a belief like yours are doing things like what you're doing, because more people like that. We need that variety in everything, that it's not always so cookie cutter or so apple pie when it comes to religion, and especially Christianity.
Well, and art. Christianity and art.
But how often do you... It's like, that's what drew me to Ezekiel when Bud sent him our way. I was like, he's a pastor and he writes horror. What?
Yeah.
And there's a ton of... If people want to go to your website, they can head over there, which we'll have you linked up. So people can click on that easily and, of course, put it on our social media. But you have a whole ton of blogs, because we could even have another show just on Satan. There is like a 5-part series called The Psychic and the Supernatural, Rethinking Satan. And I thought this was really interesting just because the word Satan, you write, is a Hebrew word that means to oppose, to obstruct, to accuse, and to challenge. And it refers to a challenger. And then you kind of go into dissecting the word as, like, it can be a noun, it can be a verb, it can be a person. There's so many different things that are happening with that character and personification. So, I mean, that could be a whole future show.
And your site is EzekielKincaid.wordpress.com.
Yes, and I also write for Horror Bound and Puzzle Box Horror. I have stuff on there as well, and that's how Bud and I got together through Horror Bound.
Cool. Well, Ezekiel, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. And this, honestly, this conversation went in a way different direction, which I'm really happy it did. Because I personally like to talk about faith. I think it's very interesting. I like to hear what people have to say about faith and what their ideas are and what this mystery of spiritualism may be. I really appreciate you being open about that and talking about that.
Yes, absolutely. Thank y'all for having me. And, like we see, religion has played a huge part in horror for a long time. You have The Omen, The Exorcist, the Conjuring series. I mean, it's kind of embedded in the horror genre. So
something a bit more sci-fi / horror that I'm literally in like 2 episodes away from completing, which is probably going to be my activities after I'm done with this tonight, is Raised by Wolves, which is the new Ridley Scott thing, which I didn't expect the content to be what it was, but it's very, very, a lot of what we talked about here today, it circles around a lot of that, around the idea of faith and the idea of atheism also, right? And those are the 2 factions, and that's all I want to say. I don't want to ruin it for anybody, but there's a lot of that, and it's fascinating. So that's also a recommendation for you, also Ezekiel, if you feel like watching that.
Oh yeah, I'll have to check that out.
Thank you again, though. Really appreciate it, Ezekiel.
All right, thank y'all.
Ghostly Talk!
Version 3.0.
Did they never sounded so good?